One important Guardians prospect seems to have been forgotten about, and another is making a lot of noise heading into 2026. Both could be big keys to the Guardians' future.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Guardians fans? Once again, thanks for coming in and hanging out with us for the next half hour to talk Guardians baseball. Because let's face it, nobody else is, and you need your daily fix to talk Guardians baseball. That's what we're here for on Locked On Guardians. Rain, sleet, or snow, or whenever it gets warm in Cleveland, which, seems like it's never going to happen. This is Locked On Guardians, the only daily podcast that covers your Cleveland Guardians every day, from the majors, the minors, the draft, everything in between. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and now the number one sports podcast network. I'm Justin Lada. If you're new here, one of the two co-hosts for the show, heading into my fourth season, and I've also spent 20 years now, including 2026, covering the Guardians minor league farm system, same as my friend and co-host, Jeff Ellis.
As I said, I'm Jeff Ellis. I've been here since Locked On expanded into baseball nearly 7 years ago. It's been a while. Before that, I was a longtime writer at Scoutin' 24/7, nationally focused on prospects in the draft. I want to thank you for making today's episode your first listen today, every day, wherever it is that you get podcasts. Big shout out to all of our everydayers, everyone who's in the Everydayer Club, responding to those comments in the Discord, keeping the conversation going. One of them had a great fact. I'll throw this out there, that last 13 years, the Guardians have had the third most wins behind the Yankees and the Dodgers. And as you rightfully pointed out, in those last 13 years, the Yankees and Guardians have the same number of World Series appearances and World Series wins.
Yep. That is extremely true. We'll see how much that holds up as we move into 2026. I don't think that's going to change. But today's show, we'll get into Shawn Armstrong, why he has a chance to be one of the Guardians' best free agent signings in recent memory, how he keeps getting better with age. We're going to get into the noise that Ralphy Velazquez is making heading into this year. And we lead off the show and the week with a prospect everyone seems to have forgotten about, maybe including us. I know at least me. And that is Juan Brito. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL Conference Championships are coming up this week. NFL and FanDuel are officially in playoff mode. So visit FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. I do think even I have forgotten a little bit about Juan Brito. And I've really enjoyed watching him in 2024. I thought it was a good season for him, and I was excited to see what was in store for him in 2025 before all the injuries hit. And, we talked a lot this offseason about where they can add a bat externally, right? Like, how can they improve this offense? And I keep, pushing Brendan Donovan, and is pretty much the main one that's not strictly an outfield.
Nico Hoerner, you got a bit of love. One of my coworkers has started listening to the show, and he's a Cubs fan. He's like, I don't want. You think they're going to trade? I'm like, no, I don't think they're going to trade Nico. But you made him nervous.
I did push that. I mean, Nico Hoerner honestly was just settling for some sort of hope for an above-average bat coming to Cleveland, and it's probably not going to happen. The Cubs probably aren't moving anybody at this point, honestly. Unless it's an outfielder, in which case, maybe the Guardians can get in on, say, a Suzuki, but he can't really play the outfield. That's neither here nor there. But in that process, I feel like the guy, at least I forgot about, maybe you did too, was Juan Brito. I mean, this was a guy who was supposed to challenge for the second base job. Last spring, he struggled, and they gave it to Arias, who was out of options, which, probably was always going to happen because of team control and I don't necessarily know that I would call it team control. I think more it was just they didn't want to bring him up early on, and
he had a really bad spring.
He did have a really bad spring. It was tough, but Arias being out of options and all the stuff this offseason that Vogt has been saying, talking about how Arias is going to move around, and it sounds like Rocchio's moving back to shortstop, and if Arias isn't guaranteed the second base job again, that leaves it pretty open for, if they don't make an addition, Juan Brito, which to me makes a ton of sense, because I am willing to give obviously a mulligan in 2025 because he spent the year with two different injuries that he had to have surgery for. We would have seen him last year at some point if he didn't get hurt. And there are some things he does that I think make a lot of sense for this team, offensively at least, that would be interesting to see. Now, Offensively. And I didn't say defensively. Would I like to still see them add a bat that's proven? Yes, I would. And not necessarily at second base. But obviously, you don't want to go too long term there. But, if they want to give Juan Brito a shot and add somebody in the outfield, I'm fine with that too. I'm interested to see what happens for him this year. I think we've forgotten about him. And I do like a lot of things that he can do.
Yeah. I
should say.
So what it comes down to for me is I can't see him as a second baseman because how much they have gone all in on ground ball pitchers and the importance of the infield defense. And, he's not just below average, he's bad. Like it's a situation where like we have had, I think very intentionally, really solid defenders at second base as kind of an undervalued defensive position. And, when Gabby went in there, he was spectacular before he moved to short, where he was also good. Rocchio was great. We've had several of our listeners put this in the comments, and I agree with them. I think one of the reasons they took off during that stretch in September was the settling in of the defense up the middle and the importance it was to, Gavin Williams is a big ground ball guy. They have a lot of ground ball pitchers. I've already stated once, but I'll just keep saying it. So, I think Brito, you and I had this conversation off air last time we recorded. It's like in a perfect world, his high end outcome is Isaac Paredes. Like when you look at profile, like that's the guy you and I both said savant wise could make some sense for him, which would lead to a lot of income for him. I'd love to get the bat in if it's, the DH position, maybe it's first base. I know he's been playing some there, more case of, need in winter ball. But like having him bounce around a little bit, to me, if he's at second base with the way they're set up, that's a harder pill for me to swallow. I think the bat could play at first. I think the bat could play in the outfield. I think the bat can play and help this team. I do think people are jumping off too much. I do think part of the reason though they're jumping out is he's a little bit of a man without a position.
It's true. Second base there's really not a great fit for him defensively because his team has enough options at first base. One of them we'll talk about, not for 2026, but we'll talk about in the next segment. But he really can't come and play first because you're not going to put him in over Kayfus or Manzardo, right? And
Kayfus has options, so and he was solid. It wasn't anything big, but like if they want to have Brito play a little bit and Kayfus gets more time down in AAA and Manzardo and him split a role, like I think there's
defensively, it's still not an upgrade, or it's still a downgrade. Like Kayfus is a good defensive first baseman. That's what I'm trying to say.
So how much does the value matter there defensively versus second base?
I mean, there was enough with Santana when they signed him, but that's a different story. Yeah, I mean, the Guardians' offense in September last year when they went on that run to chase down the division was 12th in the league at 101 WRC plus. That was a league average offense, which is impressive for them to have the record they did because of the pitching and, like you said, the defense. It wasn't like the offense carried them. It was good. It was just good enough, which is fine. And I think Brito can be a part of that. There is no real fit there defensively, but he's a switch hitter. I haven't really checked the platoon splits again. I have to go back and look and see again, but I think he's been better from the left side in his career than his right side, which, is kind of problematic, but it's still a switch hitter who does draw walks. So this is legitimately a guy who is not passive. He, I think, does have a good idea of the strike zone, and he excels at pulling the ball in the air, which is one of those things they really love is a guy who can maximize his offensive output by hitting the ball in the air to his pull side. And Brito has done that throughout his minor league career, who doesn't have, necessarily the sexiest exit velocities or batted ball data, but the guy doesn't strike out. He draws walks. He puts the ball in the air. He doesn't chase. Those are all things the Guardians are looking for right now. I don't think the bat personally does play at first because he's mostly a 20 home run guy who's going to probably run you like a 330, 340 OBP if you're lucky, depending on, and that's going to be a higher level outcome. That's what you're hoping for. And I don't think it's going to happen right off the bat, but he does fit in this lineup, doesn't he? Like it's a guy you could use, a guy who could draw some walks, can put the ball in the air, and is a switch hitter. Like that's an area of need for this team. And he was somebody, again, we should have seen. And I think you also want to get a chance to see him before you want to have Bazzana get up, right? Because there's the better idea you get from Brito before Bazzana makes his debut. At least you kind of know, because you got to get an answer on Brito sooner or later too.
Dude, I mean, I just don't think he's a priority guy. So I think it's like if Bazzana comes up, it doesn't affect. Like Brito has to make his name, or because he doesn't have the speed, he doesn't have the defense, he doesn't have
That's what I'm saying.
power. He's got a window to show.
Yeah, you gotta showcase him or let him showcase himself, right?
You heard it first here. Justin thinks he is being called up to showcase him.
Yeah, that's exactly what I said. No, I just think you want to see him. He's got to play, and Bazzana's not going to be up at the outset of spring and the season, and we all know that second base isn't Brito's future home. But if you see the bat soon enough, at least you have an idea of, okay, this guy has a bat that plays for us in the future. So there's that. All right, we may have forgotten about Juan Brito, but nobody is forgetting about Ralphy Velazquez heading into this year. We're going to tell you why in just a minute. The NFL's conference finals are here. FanDuel is in playoff mode. Every game day during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers like you even more ways to get in on the action. Right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for you inside the app. So each game day, you're going to open the app. You're going to see a pack loaded with multiple profit boosts on your bets that you can apply to the bets that you like the most. So if you really want to put something down responsibly, the boost gives you more juice on the bets you already like. I'm not trying to force you to get into something new in order to get the boost. You can go out and put it on what you really want. The Broncos, well, they're giving up 5.5. The Patriots, I should say, are giving up 5.5 to the Broncos in the AFC Championship game. Obviously, that's going to be a tough one to go with. On the MLB side of things, the Guardians over/under win total is 80.5. Look, the Tigers over/under is 83.5. The Royals is 82.5. It's very close. So check that out. Visit FanDuel.com, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. As always, thanks for hanging out with us and talking Guardians baseball every day of the week here on Locked On Guardians, making your first listen and making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. So you're living your team, your Cleveland Guardians, every single day. You want to take that fandom up a level and go ad-free for the show. Join the Everydayer Club. Get Locked On Guardians with no interruptions and members-only Discord access for just $5 a month or $50 a year. Go to Locked On Guardians. That's supercast.com or check the link in the show notes to learn more. All right, if you got nothing else at this point on Juan Brito, I was plenty pleased to see that, and also kind of hilarious to see that Ralphy Velazquez is number 4 among first basemen, MLB Pipeline's top 10 first baseman prospect ranks. It was funny because he's behind guys everyone's talked about, right? Charlie Condon. He's right there with Charlie Condon. But Ralphy Velazquez happens to be the youngest player in the top 10. He is the only 20-year-old on the list, so he won't even turn 21 until May of this year. So this will be his age 21 season. He's behind Condon. He's behind Bryce Eldridge, who's made his major league debut, and Sal Stewart, who's also made his major league debut. There's a lot of hype for him now. Like, a lot of people are moving up the list, being the youngest guy on this list and being behind guys that have made their major league debut, and somebody who is as overhyped as Charlie Condon. I personally think he should be 3rd above Condon. I guess we'll find out this year. And the thing is, Velazquez has been in Double-A, which Condon did make it there this year for 237 plate appearances. But Ralphie is 2 years younger than Charlie Condon, and he had much, much better numbers than Condon in Double-A in 2025.
Yeah, the Condon is there's a little bit of, he was he wasn't the 2nd overall pick, but the 3rd overall pick, and a lot of people had him high on their board. And listen, there were rumors about the Georgia program, and then when you look at what's happened with Collins and Condon and even Trey Phillips, who was supposed to be a high-on pick last year, like, all of that has to sit in a lot of people's minds right now, or if it's not, it probably should. But like, it's a situation where I don't know how you can put a guy who is older, who has not been as impressive, who's had a lot more swing and miss, higher than Ralphie. Like, that just feels like we're going to take the guy who had the
Eldridge,
bigger
too.
draft name. Yeah. And I'll say at least Eldridge got it up to AAA. I'm always concerned with guys that big with K rates. Like, Aaron Judge is the exception that proves the rule, not the rule.
Right.
I'm very curious to see how it goes with Eldridge, but I don't know. I don't think I would trade Ralphie for Eldridge. I don't think I would trade him. I would not trade him for Condon. Stewart's an interesting guy because, like, maybe he could play a second base. Like, I would at least have to consider it in that situation, but I don't know if I would love it. Like, I think honestly for me, and this is where anyone out there who is a Giants fan or a Rockies fan could call me a homer, but it's like I would have Ralphie probably second on that list just because Stewart has done it at the major league level and is a little more athletic.
Yeah, I could see him. Yeah, because Stewart's going to play other positions, like maybe his best position's first base, but he's played third. He possibly can play second base. Yeah, so he can move around, and his strikeout rate in the minors was never a problem. Sal Stewart had sparkling numbers all throughout the minors, and he had a great major league debut, honestly. I mean, a 124 WRC plus. I know it's only 18 games, but it's a really solid major league debut for a 21-year-old. So he's the closest in age to Ralphie because he just turned 22 in this past December in 2025. So he's still pretty young in terms of that. So, yeah, I think you're right. I think I would not trade him for Condon. I wouldn't trade him for Eldridge. Eldridge has major strikeout issues in the minors. His numbers have not been good either. And from everything, all accounts, like I've been doing a lot of my prospect rankings and watching some MLB TV film and kind of going through to start my write-ups for 2026. And like, I'm not seeing a lot of holes in Ralphy Velazquez's like offensive game. Like there's always going to be strikeouts. Like I know the numbers were better this year, but I expect him at AA and AAA for that strikeout rate to go up.
Agreed.
Against better pitching. So I think that's always going to be the issue for him. But he's already getting to the power. This is a guy who he hits more fly balls than Condon. He pulls the ball in the air more than Condon. He doesn't have to have the same issues as an Eldridge because he doesn't have the long levers. He's just, kind of the least athletic of the group, I guess. Because even people wanted to pretend that Condon was going to play third of the outfield. Like
some people said center field.
I was just going to say, some people said center field, which is not going to happen. But, Ralphie, I think the question with him is like, where's he going to fit in the future? Like he should get to, so he had 156 plate appearances at AA last year. So relatively speaking, that should put him on pace to get to Columbus at July, I think. Like you're talking like 200, 300 plate appearances this season would put him at around the 500 mark for AA, and that could get him to July. So he could be in Columbus by then. And I mean, there's nobody in Columbus who can block him. There is not a single, which is maybe why Carter Kieboom plays first base in Columbus, is it? Like, because who else is playing first base down there? If it's not, unless
it's Kayfus or Brito.
Yeah. So there's really nobody naturally blocking him at first base there. So like I know some people have asked, well, how soon can he get to Cleveland? I'm like, I don't see a pathway for him being in Cleveland this year because if he's in Cleveland this year, that means A, he did really good himself, but B, that means the team stinks and Manzardo stinks or is hurt and Kayfus stinks or is hurt. In which case they're probably not a good team, in which case it doesn't make sense to bring up Ralphie because why bring him up and burn that year early on him? Because he doesn't have to be added till next winter. Why burn that year early on a high school player? So I don't see a pathway.
To raise the profile for the next year.
Showcasing him? Is that what you're trying to say? Are you trying to use the showcase now?
There's that degree of you can help raise the player's profile, the September call up, and then hope if you're going to call them up anyways to then set them up as a better chance to win awards, to better chance to get a PPI. We've seen Cleveland hasn't done that. We have seen other teams like Cincinnati kind of did that with Sal Stewart last year. Like it didn't end up costing them any service time really to call him up when they did. And then if he starts the year with the team, like his name is now much more well known to voters than it would have been if he had not had that time last year.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right on that. I just don't see where he fits. Like again, Kayfus and Manzardo both have to fail or get hurt, or Manzardo is just a full-time DH, which he might be. So
yeah, I guess it just I'm still not buying hard on Kayfus. I guess that's just where I am based on a lot of my statements and feel.
It's not really for me a question of buying him or not. It's that he gets run and it doesn't work. And then you say, okay, well, it didn't work, or he's in the outfield and you make room for a guy like
it's like, I don't know. It's between like, I'm not as big. And then I also just, there's right field is still a glaring opening. And I can't trust Valera or Delire to stay healthy until they do.
Right. Which makes more sense for Kayfus to have more outfield time. Plus the other end of this is what no one wants to hear is that, the team isn't great this year, which is possible. And they wind up trading Quan and you have, Brito or Kayfus playing the outfield and Bazzana comes up and plays second, obviously. And then maybe that makes room for Ralphie at first base if Kayfus plays left field or something, or right field, and you have Brito in left, which, would be a poop show. But I guess that's one of the possibilities. I just think it's very hard to believe he'll be up this year. But if he has another year like he did a year ago, I mean, he's going to keep pushing his way. And there's no doubt that whenever baseball is played in 2027, if it is, he'll be on the radar for sure, I think.
Agreed.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm just really excited to see him play this year and capitalize off of what he did a year ago. I think fans should be excited about Ralphie. I think this is one of their best offensive selections they've made in recent memory, and it's a legitimate guy, home run hitter. They actually might have drafted and developed themselves.
I'll say this. I think there is a chance that while everyone loves Emerson, Colt Emerson, the Ohio kid, I think there's a chance Ralphie ends up better than Emerson. And I think it's a better than average chance, even though that was supposed to be who they got pickpocketed for before they got Ralphie. Yeah,
that's true. Ralphie seems to be a good kid too. I don't know about Emerson, but Ralphie seems to be great.
Well, I think they're both great kids. I just think he has a chance to have a higher ceiling offensively.
Probably more power. Yeah, I agree. But Emerson will have obviously more defensive value. All 100%. Right. We're talking about prospects. Let's shift to the major league team. It's harder to improve in baseball, maybe in life, as you get older at a certain age. Shawn Armstrong still trying to improve on what was his best season last year. We will look into that next. The offseason is almost over. Pitchers and catchers report in less than a month, but we're still here to warm you up and talk Guardians baseball every single day. So make sure you are hitting the bell on YouTube to get notified of when episodes go live or when we do reaction videos to any signings, trades, if they still happen, any other news that comes out about the Guardians. We will have reaction videos to new episodes. We go back to 5 days a week starting in February. And you can also auto-download on all of your audio platforms wherever you get podcasts. We're free literally everywhere. I can think of no podcast app that we are not on. And if you download it, it keeps you in the feed and you're always catching up on episodes, no matter what's going on. Also invite you to check out the Insiders Club as well. We text with the community daily over there, drop some news, rumors, mailbags, all that kind of stuff. You can join subtext.com/LockedOnGuardians to hang out with us over there as well. So this is one area, Jeff, we didn't get into, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, but Shawn Armstrong did an interview with the Foul Territory Network on YouTube about adding a changeup, which is not a pitch he's ever thrown in his major league career. It was what he called a kick change, which is kind of a new
change. Yep.
Yeah, it's kind of a new term. Basically, it's like a sinker changeup, but it's a little bit harder. So it's not like your traditional slower drop changeup. It's got more fastball qualities to it, but obviously it's a little bit slower. So he's adding that to his arsenal, which I think is really exciting because again, I think last year was probably Shawn Armstrong's best year of his career, right? Like he 100%. Had a great 2023 season with the Rays, but last year he pitched the most innings he'd ever pitched, strikeout per inning, ERA below 3. Everything looked really good for him last year. And that's, at age 35, he's going to be coming into his age 36 season here, which, it's hard as a pitcher, I think, to get better as you age, or anything in baseball. It's not as easy as it once was because, they've taken some certain supplements out of the game that were helping that back in the day when we started watching baseball. But I think adding the changeup again, we talked about this before, it just shows how he's doing it, right? Like his fastball velocity has been consistent. He's added the sweeper in recent years, which is a new pitch for him. He's throwing 3 fastballs, the cutter and the sinker, which, you need anymore. You're going to see a guy who is essentially a 1, 2, 3, 4, a 5-pitch reliever, which you don't get very much these days. So hopefully it's not one of those pitches you add that, messes up the rest of your arsenal and you have a hard time. I don't know how hard or easy it is for a reliever to have a 5-pitch arsenal because you're not throwing them all the time. Like you're only throwing hopefully 12 or 15 pitch stints. So I don't know how his command will be every single day he pitches with all 5, but you got to think with 5 pitches, 2 or 3 of them you have to have on days with, right? That can only help.
Yeah. And I think so Shawn Armstrong spent a good chunk of his career as just kind of an up and down, bounce around guy. And what's really made him stick as it is and be able to play for teams more consistently has been this development. It's him adding pitches. It's him expanding his arsenal, giving him weapons. He's going to primarily throw 2 to 3 pitches. He's got his bread and butter, and some of these will be offerings only for righties and only for lefties. But there's enough there that like he's going to keep adding. And I think, we're seeing someone who I would think in the future has a good chance to be a pitching coach with just all he has, with his own development and his interest in it. And to hear him talk, I would recommend going and checking out that podcast. It's like there's just a lot of, he's a very intelligent, spending a lot of time thinking about all of this. And I think that, I think that he is going to be such an important part of this bullpen. Cleveland ended up kind of doing a trade as Jake Junis signed for $4 million with Texas over the weekend, and they gave. But I'd much rather have Armstrong at 5.5. Then listen, Junis was great, but he's basically a rookie, and I think Armstrong's going to be effective against both sides.
Yeah, I mean, Junis. I don't want to discount what Junis did a year ago because he did play a good role for them. Ended up being a pretty good signing overall, but if it came down to it, like Junis was not a guy you were like, oh, we need to give Cade Smith a day off in the 9th inning. Junis was not your first choice to pitch in the 9th inning. But if Cade Smith needs a day off, or if I hope this still happens, I hope the Guardians, not to suppress his salary, because I know that's going to be a talk and whatever, but I still think it's important to say, like, you need to be able to have Cade Smith come out in the 7th inning and come into a game where the bases are loaded with 1 out, you're up by a run or tie game, and he can shut that down, and you can trust that, hey, Shawn Armstrong's still out there. We could use him later in the game if we have to for the 9th inning. I hope that's still the case. Now, is Cade Smith probably going to get the bulk of the saves? I'm assuming that's going to be the case, but you can't just keep running Gaddis and Smith and hope that they hold up, and the lefties with their control issues. That's the other thing too, is as you were saying about Armstrong being able to face both sides of the plate, whereas Junis was kind of a rookie. This changeup that he's developing potentially does help him with platoon splits. Like I don't know what they are off the top of my head. I haven't looked that closely, but
pretty good a year ago with him because I can't remember.
Well, he was higher. He had a 468 slug against lefties last year and a 144 slug against righties. So there was a 300-point slugging difference in lefty righty. So that's going to help him a lot, I think, if it goes well. So maybe that changeup development is more important than we think.
True. He did a good job a year ago. The constant improvement is like, it's just a positive sign, right? Like I feel like a reporter has to be anymore. Like in our job here, it's like, we always have to be learning and evolving and figuring out what the new data and information is. For a pitcher like Shawn Armstrong, like he is doing the same thing to accentuate what he can do and what he can't do. Like I was a big fan of him when they drafted him as just a hard throwing. He was just a guy who threw the ball hard as a reliever, and he is really a different pitcher on every level now. And I think, again, he was someone you and I targeted from the start, thought that he'd be a great addition, and I'm very happy that they did go out and add him to this team.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, learning, like that's how Brad Goldberg essentially got his job with the organization, as he took it upon himself during the COVID year to go out and learn different data and new things, and that's essentially what got him a job. And that's what has him on the radar of other teams for pitching coach jobs relatively soon. So hopefully not this year at this point, but it's coming sooner than you think. And
I would bet he's gone next year. I would really.
Yeah. If Carl Willis doesn't retire at the end of this 2026, I could think Goldberg's not going to be with the team in 2027 if Carl Willis is back. But there's so many guys in this. That's the other thing, is pairing guys like Armstrong with Carl Willis and Goldberg and Joe Torres and Caleb Longshore. Like they got a lot of, and Kluber, Kluber's still hanging around as a pitching coach, analyst, advisor role. I'm not really sure. I don't think he knows what it is either. So that's important to pair guys like Shawn Armstrong.
So whatever he wants role.
Basically,
however much.
Yeah. You want to come help out our pitching staff? Yeah, we'll do it. All right. We've kind of exhausted that topic, I feel like, but Jeff, you had a couple things you wanted to throw out there. Maybe there's still a chance the Guardians can try to get on some sort of radar for a move that might move the needle.
Yeah, now that we've seen a lot of the market shift, I will say I think there's a better chance just in general for trades to start happening. There's not as much in the free agent market. I'm curious to see what happens with with Framber and with Bellinger. And Zach Gallen, kind of the forgotten guy of the qualifying offer. At some point,
Zach Gallen's getting a 1-year deal with somebody. It's too late for him. He
had
a bad year last year.
I could see a Nick Pivetta-esque contract, something like that with all the opt-outs and things like that. But And at some point, we'll sit down and talk about just how much every pick moved up and down for the team, because every little bit does affect and change their situation. But very quickly, looking at what has occurred over the last few bits, I read a piece from Will Salmon with the New York Mets, or Salmon, however you say his name, about how much they still value Brett Baty, even though he doesn't have a position. After all of our talk about second base, I would say if there's a way to trade a starter to get Baty, I would be in that in a heartbeat. They talked about an outfielder or a starter. Of course, that question is, would you do Quan for Baty? I don't think either of us would at this point, even though Baty had a great year last year. It's one great year. And then
that's what either.
Yeah, hard to say. And the other one that's kind of interesting and something, we're kind of low on time, but we'll look at in more detail at some point is the Dodgers, because the Dodgers are now set, right? And they are so set. We talked about the infielder that they gave $4 million a year to, who's probably going to start the year in AAA. They are depth for days. If they add back in Kike Hernandez, they're going to have even more guys going down. Alex Call no longer has a position, and the Dodgers are in an interesting place. They don't necessarily need major league talent. Maybe another reliever would be nice, but that is a team where Cleveland might be able to find help by trading prospects, and that's how the Dodgers keep their lifeblood alive. You look at their top 10, it's a lot of guys they have traded for. The Zaire Hopes comes to mind. It's a lot of players they've traded for and helped develop.
Mike Sirota,
James Tibbs. So there is
the Reds for that, by the way.
Yeah, I don't understand what the Red Sox are doing. For Dustin,
the Reds for
Sirota. Well, I mean the Red Sox gave up two of the Dodgers' top 15 prospects to borrow Dustin May for like a month. But that's off task. But to get back to, it's like the Dodgers are the rare team that might have the depth, who is a contending team that will trade you for prospects. And because of all the draft picks they've lost 4 picks this next year. That comp pick, that pick that's probably gonna be 30th overall, has a lot of value. And another thing to consider for the future, what they did with the Mets, with what the Mets and the Dodgers are doing, losing international money by signing free agents, we might be seeing more of those situations, like when they added Franklin Gomez, who is going to be a top 30 prospect for us both. So not the time to go as in depth, but some things to keep in mind and to percolate that Justin and I may be talking about later this week.
Yeah, I'm really excited to get into that. We do have to do our pitcher tool draft. We did our position player version of that before the end of the year. So I think this week or next week we get into that. We're still trying to get this interview nailed down for one of our favorite pitching data gurus. We're going to do a mailbag here soon as well. And, we're going to do a spring training preview sooner or later, because pitchers and catchers are a month away. So still a lot to talk about as off season winds down, but a lot to talk about as spring training ramps up. So we hope you stick here with us and hang out with us on Locked On Guardians, the show, and the Everydayer Club, which you can join at LockedOnGuardians.supercast.com.
Thank you for joining us, and go Guardians.